Welcome, everybody, to a hand history review sponsored by Unibet Poker, in which we will be analysing the key hands played by Barry Carter on his way to the Supernova final table. I'm David Lappin, and I am joined by poker authors Dara O'Kearney and Barry Carter. Welcome to you both.
David.
Hi, David.
Great to have you here, guys. Before we start, Barry, on making this deep run, I suppose in what is Unibet's flagship Sunday tournament, it's fair to say you had the piss taken out of you just prior by Dara and I when we did our last hand history video together. We tended to take the mickey a little bit, some PKO spots where you took wilder lines. You're obviously keen to make a point here by progressing so far in our tour, in the Unibet special tournament of the week, of all places, just to really show us up.
Well, we'll decide on that after we've seen the hands, to be perfectly honest with David. But no, in all honesty, I'm quite good mental game wise in that money jumps don't particularly affect me too badly. Usually, I'm just grateful for being in the deep end of the tournament, and whatever happens, happens. I did feel a kind of, just to carry on our conversation from last time, a brag ICM pressure in that I really wanted to make the final table of this tournament. So I think I made some mistakes, at the 2-table mark, precisely because this tournament actually meant quite a lot to me. And I've been in tournaments with bigger sort of first prizes where I didn't feel that pressure. But because this is the site I play on regularly, I was like, yeah, I'll shut up.
Sorry, he invented the phrase brag equity the last time.
It sounds similar to what our old friend Fergie used to call glory equity or trophy equity as well. The sort of idea that there's sort of additional benefit. Yeah, I mean, we were obviously very critical of Barry's play the last day, and to be fair to Barry's game, actually, I don't even know what I'm going to say. No, I think let's just leave it there.
Okay, let's get to it here. Obviously, you jumped in right from the start, or pretty close to it. We can see there that only 205 entrants showed up. We have a few bust outs, so action can be thick and fast in this, I know from experience. But yeah, it looks like the blinds are going to be 50, 100 or 100, 100, 200. Okay, so we're a little bit into it then, it's fair to say. Maybe this is like level 5 or 6 or something like that.
Yeah, probably. All the hands that you're going to see are late game hands, with the exception of this one, just because, to be perfectly honest, it was relatively easy on the way to the final table. Not that I was playing well, but there is a certain type of running good, which is just basically when you don't get tough decisions for like 4 hours, and it was quite comfortable. This is the only hand that I thought was quite interesting in the early stages. I kind of wanted just to get your ideas on my flop line in this tournament. At the time, I thought this was Jamie Nixon that I was playing against. Funny thing is, after this hand, actual Jamie Nixon replaced him in this seat. So it's just somebody who's sort of a fan of Jamie Nixon. But either way, my kind of read was, if you know who Jamie Nixon is, then you're probably a half decent player or understand some of these concepts. And that did kind of colour my...
Sorry, I really thought you were going to say, well, if you know who Jamie Nixon is, you're probably his mum.
It could also be Brad Simpson.
Good stuff. Well, look, favourable flop there. Obviously, you have the nut flush draw. This is a spot where I might check back myself. Interested to know how you proceed.
Oh, I'd love to listen to your rationale why you check back before I don't do that.
Okay. Well, if checked, you are assuming you get checked. Obviously, it's the kind of board that can't hit your opponent, and you have a pretty good, ace high hand with some backdoor potential, the direct nut flush draw, and I suppose I don't necessarily see the point in bloating. If we do go for a sizing, it definitely goes small, but that's just the way I'm thinking here.
Yeah, there's a variation of that because so I bet relatively small.
Nope, he's going big.
Gone big.
Okay, so Dara, maybe to chime in here, like obviously I've put forward the notion of maybe checking back a spot like this. How do you feel about that, and how do you feel about what Barry did?
Yeah, I think if we put this into a solver, the solver would probably say mix both checks and bets. And the reason for that is if you always do the same thing with this type of hand, let's say we always bet, for example, then when we check and the club comes on the turn, we can't have the nut flush. And a thinking watchful opponent would know that. Similarly, if we always check this hand and we do check and we do bet and he calls and the club comes, he can know that we can't have the club, the nut flush. So because of that, if we're playing against somebody absolutely perfectly, we have to mix both. That means actually that the EV of both is the same. So it doesn't really matter what you do. My personal preference is very strong for betting. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the guy will just fold. And no matter what he folds, that's good for us. Because even two random cards, even if we happen to be ahead now, two random cards have roughly 25 to 30% equity against us. So winning the pot right now is good. The second reason I like betting is that our hand can make a very, very strong hand by the river. It has very good, robust equity. If a club comes, we have the nut. We have the nuts basically, unless it's the 8 of clubs. We can also hit runner straights, which will actually be very well disguised. Like if it comes 7-5, it's hard for him to imagine. It's hard for him to just give us a 9. Similarly, if it comes 10 queen. So there's a lot of ways we can hit a really strong hand. If we wait to start betting until we hit that strong hand, he's less likely to put money into the pot. Because it'll be very obvious that the club's got there or whatever. So I kind of like betting for two reasons. First, getting to fold right now is good, but also even if he calls, that's not a bad outcome for us either. I think if we make the decision to bet, I agree absolutely that betting big makes the most sense on this board. On boards like this, middle card boards where there are literally lots of straight draws, like 10-9 and 9-7 are both open-ended. Queen 10, Queen 9, 9-5, 7-4, and 7-5 is open-ended as well. So all of those have got shots. So if we bet small, all of those hands can continue. And any card between a 3 and a queen could potentially make a straight for our opponent. So that'll make it much harder for us to get money into the pot on the next street good. So therefore, I think betting big now, while we have a very strong hand, is probably the best plan.
Excellent stuff. Well, Dara approved there, Barry. So let's see how we proceed. I assume we're getting at least
exactly
a call
what
here.
I thought when he went in game, but
yeah, it's good.
So he does raise you. Okay, interesting here. I guess this. Well, we could go a few different ways here. I guess. What are you thinking, Barry?
Well,
it's a small enough raise.
Sorry,
it's quite a small raise, actually.
Yeah, well, if this was a smaller buy-in tournament, at this point, I'd probably just come over the top of him, knowing that I've got good equity against any hand, and there's some draws out there that I sort of dominate. Because this was at the time, I thought Jamie Nixon and a bigger buy-in competition. I kind of thought if I shove over the top of him, then it's really obvious what I've got, and I'm only going to get called by sets. So my sort of logic here was actually to call, which is something I rarely do. So I'll just, yeah. Obviously,
I quite like the call. You're in position after all, so you have good visibility on what happens later on. You could probably find a call to a lot of bets. Given that he's gone small on the flop there, he might go small again, in which case we'll obviously have the price to call again on the turn. Maybe we won't love the board pairing, but we're going to be happy enough to proceed and then maybe still be able to get the entire stack in if we do make the nuts by the river.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think calling is very attractive for all the reasons, being in position. We're also going to know exactly where we are with our hand. Like if we get to the river and we bricked, we have a bad ace high, so we're not folding. We're not folding away very much equity if he triple barrels and we fold. Similarly, if when we get the club, we have the nuts, so we know we have the nuts, and he doesn't. So I think calling is very attractive for that reason. Also, there's just a pot control element. This is a fairly soft. This is as soft as Sunday majors get. So you don't necessarily want to get it in a spot where you have 45 to 55% equity and you're hoping to win. It's not a PKO. So those are the reasons for calling. There are reasons for raising too. I mean, as Barry said, he can have dominated draws. Like he could have 10-9, for example, which we're in amazing shape against. And he could be just going with it. He could have a worse club draw, which we also absolutely crush. Anytime we have sort of the nut draw, it's always reasonable to just raise and try and get it in. Because if we do run into it, like even if we run into a set, we have decent enough equity, and we can actually run into hands that we have absolutely crushed.
So obviously it goes sort of dream situation for me, and I hit my nuts on the turn. So you can see my sort of cursor go incredibly quickly to call, but do you, given that I've taken the passive line, it felt like calling, like I was perhaps pot controlling a jack or something like that was the way to go here. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think one of the keys to these types of spots is he is going big now. Okay, his flop raise was a very small sizing, but now he's actually gone 90%. And when someone goes big, they sort of polarize themselves to nut-ish hands, and we know he can't have the nuts, but flushes himself, maybe sets that he's now trying to make sure you don't draw out on him with something like the ace jack with the ace of clubs. That might be part of his logic. The other thing is he could be just like using this card as a good scare card against some of your over pairs if he does have the 9-10 that Dara mentioned. So there's no real need to raise in this spot. I think when someone polarizes themselves, you should keep all the weak hands in.
Yeah, I agree strongly with that. I don't see any point in raising here. This is the one decision I think is really clear cut. We should just call here. We have the nuts. There's no really bad card for us on the river. Like if a club comes, he might actually have, say, the queen of clubs and think he has the best hand now. So a club won't be bad for us. It doesn't make the board worse. If the straight comes as well, like he's still likely to pay it off if he has a very, very strong hand, because he can't just give us the straight. And another reason why I don't raise here is like I can't think of any hand that we would bluff raise here. So we're basically just incredibly unbalanced when we raise. We're only raising this type of hand. I mean, maybe if we had queen 10, which we decided to float, and now we picked up additional equity, say queen 10 with one club, and we decide we don't want to call, we might decide to turn that into a bluff. That would be a better hand to raise and get him to fold. The bottom of his range, as David said, his range is polar. So he might have something. When we have queen 10, he might have something like ace jack, for example, which he now decides to fold, and that's obviously brilliant for us. But with this hand, I think, let's just call.
Well, you said there's no bad river cards.
The 6, the 8, okay. Obviously once the 8 comes, it reduces the number of sets possible as well. We can't get away anyway, so
we can't. Yeah, I think that's the key. Like we can't get away anyway. Like this is a bad river card in the sense that like some hands have pulled ahead of us, but it's not a bad river card in the sense that like if we had shoved on the turn, he was calling with all of his sets anyway, and he was getting there either way. So it's not that we let him get there in that sense. Yeah,
arguably another club was a worse card for you because it could have been an action killer.
Yeah.
So I think in this spot, he's going to show up with the 7-5, the 9-10, maybe the queen 10 of spades sometimes. He's going to show up with, a pretty cold decked, queen 10 of clubs at some frequency too. Look, if he has the 6s or somehow he has the jack 8 or the 6-8, what can you do?
It's so you had the queen 8, which is out of interest from his perspective. The fact that the board has paired an 8 and he has an 8, which means he's, he's blocking certain boats or anything. Does that change his decision in any way, shape, or form?
I would definitely have called his hand on the flop, for what it's worth.
I would too. Yeah, I agree. Non-nut flush draws are generally better played passively, because this can happen. We can run into the nuts or a better flush draw. In terms of the river, I mean, I guess you're shoving anyway, but maybe he should check call, because like you can have queen 10, you could possibly have 10-9 with one club, queen 10 with one club, those types of hands. They're going to fold to his bet, and you might bluff them. And I think all of your other hands are going to bet as well. So I think by shoving, he basically just folds out your bluffs. If he bets, if he checks, you might go for it with a queen 10 or a 10-9. I mean, he's going broke anyway, I think, unless you bet less than all in. But I mean, if we were deeper, like if we were super deep, if there was a lot of chips left behind, his hand might make a very good check raise on the river. Because when he checks and you check, he always wins. But when you have a better hand, you're going to bet, and if he then raises, you might actually have to fold a better flush, thinking, "Crap, he's got a boat." This type of like showdown and blocker hand, showdown and not type hands blockers, that often makes a very good check raise on the river. But we're not deep enough for that to be a factor here.
Yeah, and when I'm kind of looking at the kind of range he can target, like I suppose he's trying to get you to call with this bet with aces, with the ace of clubs. Like it's kind of, and then the question is, do you even call? Like it's a pretty horrible board.
Yeah, or even King Jack. Like Barry could have kind of a hand like King Jack, but like, do we really call it off with King Jack here?
Yeah.
It's I think he probably should have checked the river.
Okay. Well, as you said, Barry, you sort of proceeded with relatively easy decisions all the way through. So I imagine we're going to see you with a much bigger stack now for hand number 2.
There's quite a time jump that happens now. Yeah, we're down to 46 players. We're on the literal bubble now,
Yeah, so it goes hand for hand on Unibet with 2 from the money. Obviously, you see there it's just flicked from 2 to 1. So we are, as you say, on the direct bubble. We obviously lost somebody last hand on one of the tables, and now you're sort of in a spot where, the ICM is fairly significant for a middling stack, and you are a middling stack. You could possibly make an argument for a very tight fold with ace 10 in this spot. I would probably do that, particularly with Yabli, who I recognize as somewhat of a regular on the site. And I think those people can very easily just 3-bet you and put you, in the bin a lot. So I probably, given it's the bubble, unless I've seen on another table, unless you've taken your little bit of time to see that maybe a 10k stack is flicked it in and they've been called and they're in trouble and they're gone, then you're not really on the bubble and you can kind of play the hand like the first hand after the bubble.
Yeah, I normally would fold. Well, sorry, I would definitely be thinking about folding this hand in this position. And this is what I wanted the feedback on. My rationale for I opened here is I have a blocker, which is nice, and it's the one stack at the table I think in the big blind is likely to overfold to me because, not the one, there's 2 of them at this table. 3 of them, in fact, 3 short stacks. But he's a relatively short stacked player. So I figured he's the person I could exert the most pressure on, and I have a blocker to potentially stop other players coming over the top of me.
I'm not sure your blocker matters because I don't think anyone needs an ace to 3-bet you here. I think Martini and Yabli may just look at 2 napkins and decide that's good enough to 3-bet you.
I kind of disagree. I mean, I think people probably knit up a little bit too much in the bubble, and particularly with this kind of stack, because we're well covered, but at the same time, Yabli doesn't necessarily want to get coolered by us and be down to 140k. And the small blind, we have half of the stack. So in these spots, I mean, if Yabli is like literally 3-betting every hand, then I'll just accept the inevitable and fold. But if I haven't played a hand for a while and I get this type of hand, I'll happily go and open it. And I think the blocker kind of helps, because I think if Yabli has an ace, he's definitely 3-betting us. If he looks down at 4-2, he might not. He might just let this one go. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's a fairly simple math calculation. If we raise up to 5,600, we're risking 5,600 to win 7k. So if this gets through just over 40% of the time, we have a profitable spot. So we have to ask, like, is Yabli going to bet 3-bet us 60% of the time? Maybe he is, but my general situation in bubbles now is I don't knit up as much as I used to, because I think you can end up leaking away too much equity when you do that. I will go on opening. I will accept the inevitable and have to fold this to a 3-bet. But I don't think he's necessarily always going to 3-bet me. So I'll tighten up, but not to the point where I would fold this hand.
I knew nothing about the players at the table. This was literally a redraw when we got to 45 players, so I didn't really know any of the players. I did struggle my way through HRC to actually look at. HRC is a flawed tool when you're sort of deeper than 10 big blinds, because it doesn't factor in equity realization post flop particularly. But I just for fun, I put it in, and it does seem to think that ace 10 off is a
profitable open. Yeah, there's a couple of things here. It's profitable, but it's not super profitable. And as David said, we have a very easily exploited hand. There's a general rule of thumb in these spots that if something makes 10% of aces, we definitely open it. And if it makes less than 10%, you can see aces is making plus 0.168 as an open. And this is only making less than 10% of that. So, I mean, David is a big old nit, but there's certainly a lot of justification for his line. If you just click on that range, let's look at what the 3-betting range is supposed to be from the button. So, that one there. So the cutoff, the button can go really wide here, 22%, which is basically all of his aces. And this is why the ace blocker is important. Like if you look at the range he's supposed to 3-bet, that's so ace heavy. So once we have the ace, that really cuts down that range. Now, if we're up against somebody who is way wider than this, as David fears, and he's going to 3-bet, queen 10 off, king 9 off, king 8 off, lots of suited connectors, etc., then the ace blocker does become less important, and we are going to have to fold the hand. Now, if you click on that, click on him 3-betting, and now go back to our range.
Sorry, our range. So,
sorry, no, you have So that's his calling range. Sorry, what's his 3-betting range?
His 3-betting range is. Oh, I see. Sorry.
Okay. So his 3-bet is. Okay. His 3-bet range is different. Okay. So. No, that's his response to a small blind 3-bet. Yeah, right. Go down to the next one. You clicked call by mistake. That's the 3-bet range.
I'm with you.
Okay, so that's the 3-bet range. So as you can see, he can actually flat a lot of hands profitably, and that's probably the most annoying thing about opening in these spots and bubbles. Like, yeah, he can exploit you by 3-betting, but he can actually flat super wide, because when you miss the flop, you just have to give up. And even if you hit the flop with this type of hand, you won't want to play a particularly big pot. So actually, he's supposed to mostly call. Like his calling range there is 22.8%, and he's only 3-betting 33%, and it's 3.3%, and it's a polar range. And when he 3-bets us, we have to fold ace queen, for example, and ace 10 is a no-brainer call. So we are going to have to fold. So if you played around the ranges a bit more, you would find that if you widened his 3-betting range, for example, particularly if you widened his 3-betting range, then ace 10 off would stop being profitable. So
we have a hand a bit like that later on. So
so this is kind of the crux of the hand. Like David has a very good read on population tendencies, and he may be right that Bleed is actually going way wider than he's supposed to. If that's true, then there are other ways to exploit it. You exploit it by like waiting until you have a really strong hand and let him auto 3-bet you. But actually, it does get through this time.
I think this has brought up a really interesting point, because I suppose you're right. I'm a dirty old nit in these spots, and I, playing live poker, 30 bigs, particularly awkward stack and vulnerable to a 3-bet. As you said, also the prospect of being out of position to maybe quite a large flatting range too. But I also sort of put myself on the flip side. I know if I was Yableet, I would be looking to be way looser than maybe, what's recommended there in HRC, because I would feel like there are more exploits available and people will make more mistakes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a reasonable point. The one thing I would say is, what's the starting stack in this tournament?
15K.
15K, okay. So we started this with approximately 6 starting stacks. So our equity in the tournament is roughly €600. So the min cash, while it's nice, is only a quarter of that. So we shouldn't overly focus on trying to lock up the min cash. That's one thing. Also, having a big stack on the bubble, if the bubble gets through, is worth a lot. And having a big stack when we get through the bubble is worth a lot. So in this spot, if I thought Yabby was 3-betting way too wide, I would just take my courage in my hands, and when he 3-bets, I 4-bet shove, knowing that he has to fold most of the time. And even when I run into it, there'll be a lot of flips. There'll be a lot of hands where I have 40% equity, and if I win that and get up to almost 200k, now I'm in an amazing spot to actually kick on and make a deep run rather than just kind of scrape into the money.
Yeah, I think that's actually an excellent counterpoint, and maybe actually the most salient one of them all, which is that not a lot of our equity is in the min cash here, unlike the guy there, drink on me or even overbet.
Absolutely, yeah. No, if I have those stacks, I'm just falling into the money. That's a given.
Great stuff.
Well, we still haven't finished because I still find a way to mess it up.
Well, I'm going to guess Martin gets involved here, or as you said, Overbet's probably in a bit of an ICM coffin himself. So
he seems to be thinking about it.
So he's just flatted. And now, I guess, as you said, Dara, we've missed the board. We do have a couple of backdoors. We do have ace high, but should Martin be constructing a leading range in this spot? I actually think he should.
I agree completely. Yeah, I think he can lead almost any two cards here. It's just going to be so probably. All he has to do is throw out a small bet, like 6k, and we have to fold. And we have to fold most of our range. It's massively profitable in these spots when you cover somebody to call and just dunk the flop.
Yeah.
Yeah, to sound intelligent, I actually was thinking about this because Dara and I are currently working on our third book together, and we discussed this at length, like how profitable it is for a big stack to just lead out against people 100% of the time. So when he didn't, I kind of thought I can quite easily represent the king here. I mean, I'm supposed to have ace king a lot of the time on a tight bubble.
Sure.
Would you agree with that rationale for me going for let's see, do I go a little bit more than a smaller than half pot? Nope, a half pot continuation bet.
To be honest, I personally would probably just check because I think the way I would play my range if I were in Martin's seat is when I have nothing or a very weak something, I'm going to lead out. And when I have something, I'm going to check raise. Now, maybe he's not playing like that. I definitely see the merits in the bet. I mean, he can play back a lot of this, but he might not in practice. And just getting to fold is good. He's not folding a better hand, though. If he folds, he has a worse hand than our hand. We still benefit from him folding out equity, but I think given the extreme ICM that we're in, I just kind of hope to get to showdown and hope to win.
Yeah, to make it kind of a general statement about strategy in these spots, and this is spots actually I'm pretty used to, and Dara's pretty used to from the satellite streets and from just a general good ICM awareness. I think you're sort of supposed to play almost all your range as a bluff catcher. So like when you do have a good hand, you're actually meant to check back and let him try and bully you off, whatever hand. He doesn't know what your hand is, obviously. But that essentially, because the ICM can be, a painful spot for you, maybe by the river. If you go check here and he goes bet, and he might even choose quite big sizings to really try and hurt you. I think you're supposed to probably sit back with even your good hands here and treat them all like bluff catchers.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think going back to him, the way I would play in his seat is if I had something like 9 of hearts, I'll just lead out and get you to fold a lot of your hands. If I have a stronger draw like 5-6 or spades, I'll check, and if you bet, I'll raise. And if you check, I'll bet the turn no matter what. I think that's how he should play his range. Now, as played, once he calls the flop, I think we are now just trying to get the showdown. I would fold the river to any normal size bet, but I'm not folding to this.
Yes. I've just picked up a second pair. There's a good chance he's got some sort of flush draw or a.
He can also be just blocker betting a worse hand. Like he can have like ace 4 or pocket 8s or something like that, and he's like, oh, I don't want to face a big bet, so I'll try the small bet.
Yeah, and in a way, like it's not too bad. The fact that he did go for a smaller sizing is kind of nice because, as Dara said there, you had a very easy call at that price. You didn't want to face a pot size bet; that would have been a bit miserable. So kind of nice to only face a 1/3, tick that button. Now you're going to still have 20 something bigs, even if it goes wrong.
Yeah. And literally the next hand, I find myself in the same spot again. Again, I'm betting into a stack that doesn't want me to bet into them. I'm justifying it with the fact that I have a blocker again.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's the same spot, but it's not really.
No, because I've got less chips, and
I definitely fold. You have less chips. That's by far the biggest factor. It's also one seat earlier, and also everybody at the table has seen that you opened ace 10 the last hand, so they're not necessarily giving you a knotted range. And there are more stacks behind that can just call. Like it's super profitable for anybody in position that covers you to call, and that means basically button, cut off, and hijack are all in that spot. So I don't think this deal will work very often. We have a hand that doesn't play well post flop. I think this one should just go in the bin.
Yeah, and I kind of realised this on the flop, and this was an absolutely atrocious board for me to come up against a player who's got position on me because he hits this so often in so many ways that I just gave up instantly on the flop at this point.
Like, honestly, even if there was no ICM, and there's obviously quite a lot of ICM on the bubble, this isn't a kind of a brilliant open. You're not loving opening ace 10 here.
Yeah,
either.
Yeah, you're supposed to with no ICM, but it's barely profitable.
Yeah, it's like basically the worst one, isn't it?
I think ace 9 can just about be opened as well.
Okay.
It depends on the exact sizes behind. Sometimes ace 9 is line, sometimes ace 10, but yeah, like it's bottom of the range and it's not making very much money at all.
So we've had a few more hands at this stage. Martin81 has proven himself to be very aggressive. He was coming over the top of everyone for sort of 3 or 4 hands, and he opens again now. And I was wondering if there was any merit to playing back at him with we had suited aces to suited small aces are typically good hands to go to re-raise somebody because you've got the blocker, and then when you do get called, you've got a potential straight or flush outs, and you're not dominated by the likely hands you get called by. I didn't do any of that. I just folded like a nit. But I was just wondering if there's any merit to playing this hand at all. Would you consider it on the bubble against an aggressive player?
What would you do, David?
I'm probably going to fold it, to be honest. I like, obviously it is the kind of hand that can make the nuts. It's the kind of hand where, you're happy to get it in with a flush draw on the flop in a non-bubble scenario. But, I kind of feel like you're calling here to maybe leak away more chips because I don't really think you can.
I was actually asking in terms of should I shove all in over the top of him?
Yeah.
Oh no, I wouldn't do that.
That's interesting because
that's not bad though.
Because I actually would call. I do see some merits to raising. I think we don't necessarily have to raise all in either. Like I think if we raise to 14K, he might think shit he's got aces or kings and might just let this one go. And if he shoves on us, we obviously fold. And okay, it sucks to be down to 40K, but we'll still almost certainly get through the bubble. So I think that's one option. I think shoving. I mean, it's risky because everything that calls is going to crush us. So while I see some merits, it'll usually work, but when it doesn't work, it's so disastrous. I think I would err on the side of caution, not do it. But I think the reason why I call is like it's one big blind. If we miss the flop, we check fold. We haven't really hurt our chances that much. I also think the way he will play against us, he will auto bet any flop. But if we check call, he'll maybe put the brakes on. Because, for example, if we defended pocket 4s and flopped a set, we would check call. Most of our our continuing range will be much stronger than normal. So I think if we flop a flush draw, we can check call one, and if we don't hit the flush, we can give up on the turn. We don't have to put in all of our stack to do that. But I also think that if we flop a flush draw and we check call one, he'll actually check the turn and we get to realize our equity. Also going the other way, like if he is mental aggro and he's trying to pressure, he will bet for us when the flush gets in. He'll try and represent the flush. So we'll get the double up. If we had less chips, I'd definitely fold, because getting to the bubble is the most important thing. But I think given we only have to put in 5% of our stack to see the flop, I think that's fine. And I have run a lot of Monker sims recently, and that's generally the way Monker plays. Monker will generally call the suited aces in this spot and the pocket pairs, for the reason that they can flop really, really strong.
Okay, so to kind of test out your mettle on that one, Dara, let's imagine you do call, and let's imagine we get the ace high board and he triple barrels. Is it?
No, I'm not calling down. I'm not calling down in that spot. I'm calling one. To be honest, I'm calling one with most of my hands. I'm calling one when I hit the ace. I'm folding on the turn if he hits again, unless I've hit two pair. If I flop a flush draw, I'm calling the flop, folding the turn, unless I have a good enough price to draw. Most of my range, but that's balanced by the other hands in the range that I'm calling with the pairs. They can call three, and they will call three. So if he always barrels into me, okay, he's going to exploit this part of my range, but I'm going to counter exploit him when I hit a set. And if he always gives up after the flop, then I exploit him with this type of hand.
Very good.
Okay. Next hand is right. We're inside the money. We've everyone's relaxed a little bit. First question: do you open a suited ace here, where ICM pressure is at the lowest it's going to be for a little while? Suited aces tend to play well from most positions. Have I got enough chips to justify opening here?
I think so.
I think it's fine. Yeah, I think it's kind of like it's not like one of your better ones, but it's one of your worst ones.
Yeah, I think in this spot, I would start tightening up the unsuited stuff, but I go on opening pretty much all the suited stuff. I guess I wouldn't open ace two suited, maybe not ace three suited, but all the other ones. The big advantage of opening those is that it's kind of a cheap way to give yourself board coverage, because there's only 4 combos of each suited ace. But if you're opening them all, it's only the same as opening a quarter of the unsuited aces, but you have everything covered. Like if the board comes 8-8-2, you can have an 8, and obviously the fact that you can flop a flush draw greatly helps as well.
Yeah.
It's an unusual.
So this is a good flop for ace-8, really. In that is this a good flop for ace-8? Now that I think about it, it doesn't seem like good now that I said that, but this guy has dumped out into us as well, which, my old school life player sort of mentality thinks, wow, that's a set, definitely. But what are you thinking?
David has very good reason the population in Unibet, much better than mine. What do you think is typically the range when this happens, David?
Well, to kind of go back in time, like 10 years ago, maybe, back in my maybe full tilt days or whatever, donk leads were just always weak then, and whether you had it or you didn't have it, you tended to pounce on them. I think people are a bit better than that these days, but I still think these donk leads, particularly on this board texture, which is not a board he should really have a lead.
You shouldn't have donks here, yeah.
I think maybe gives away the fact that he's probably a weak player. So now we have to work out if he's a weak player who has it and is kind of like, just leading out with his 7-5 or his ace-5, or is he a weak player who is maybe doing kind of a nonsense lead out here? Because sometimes you will see people just lead out 10 jack here and you sort of scratching your head going, that made no sense. So, the fact that we don't have ace king, ace queen, ace jack makes me feel like we probably shouldn't raise. Also, the fact that we have an 8 in our hand does block a 4-6 if that's what he's trying to draw to. Makes 6-8 a little less likely, but again, it's tough. Like, it's very hard to just range somebody when they do something completely unexpected and actually strategically poor.
Yeah, what this looks like to me is looks like what I used to call a let's keep it friendly bet, where they've hit something but they don't love it. They don't want to face a big bet, so they throw out this kind of weird blocker, which isn't really a blocker because they don't have the lead. So like I wouldn't be surprised to see something like a 7 or a 5 do this. He goes like, oh shit, if I check, he's going to bet representing the ace, and I'm not going to know what to do. So I'm just going to bet and hope he folds, or at least he doesn't bet bigger. It could also be something like 8-9, or some weird draw. It doesn't really make sense. I mean, Barry said he's scared of a set here, but like, why would a set bet? Because like you're pretty much always going to see bet the ace high board, so it makes far more sense to just check to the razor, to use that old phrase. So I think this is more often than not a weak hand, which probably doesn't have very much equity against us. So I agree with David. I think calling is the way to proceed here. Also, like when we don't have the ace, we don't want to be overfolding here. Like calling when our strong hands make sense as well, or stronger. Yeah, I mean he's gone for the same bet again. So
does anything change with your line on the turn here? Do you think that weakens his range, so we should come over the top of him? Or
again, I don't see the point in raising here because he's just going to fold all the worst hands, and if he is doing this with a monster, he's not folding. So I think his range is mostly weakish, middly hands with the occasional monster, maybe. But it doesn't really make sense for him to play monsters this way. But people do that. Why would he fold it?
Yeah, I was in the maybe because I play like sort of the €20 games on Unibet. I'm just more expecting to see a big hand here, like a better ace or a set here. But maybe like I did notice some population differences in this tournament compared to the sort of €10 and €20 games that I play at Unibet, and I think I had that in my head when I made the fold. So,
I mean, I definitely call here, but David, what do you think? Maybe you think.
Yeah, I think I'm almost psychologically, once I see that donk lead on the flop, I'm probably thinking to myself, there aren't too many runouts where I'm not just going to buckle up and hit the call button every time. I know that means you're just like,
very much,
huh?
Particularly when he bets that small. Like
yeah, well, like I definitely think he's massively exploiting us if he can lead a third, and we fold an okay ace.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely like not a good enough minimum defense frequency we're exposing. Now, you've obviously gone for something a bit more meta, which is that, okay, he's bet and we've called, and now he's decided he's happy to bet again and arguably sizing up a river shove. So, you don't really want to face the river shove. Maybe that you were definitely thinking I'll fold then, so I may as well fold now. I don't like that so much because I don't like folding to bets that haven't been made yet. And I also think I might have called with the ace-8 on a lot of rivers anyway. But look, it could have been a good. Of course, he could absolutely have 7-5, ace-2, ace-5, ace-7. When somebody does something that they're not supposed to do, we can be pretty confident that they're a poor player and they don't construct ranges correctly. So we are in a bit of a dark tunnel guessing game.
Yeah, I like that phrase you use. Don't bet the turn. Don't fold the bets that haven't been made yet. And that is kind of like old life player thinking of like, well, if I call the turn, I'm going to have to call the river. I could see myself potentially folding the river there. Like if I call and the river breaks and he just shoves, now I might go, okay, well, he's representing super strength. I'll call him twice, and I don't think he would take this line with a weak hand. And I might talk myself into a call on the river. But I certainly wouldn't fold the turn. Like the essence of good balanced poker is there have to be hands in your range at every point that will call this bet and fold to the next bet. A lot of people think that's weak poker. They go like, well, I can't call the next bet, so I'll fold now. That's actually a terrible way to play. You have to have hands which will fold to the next bet, but also have hands that will continue to the next bet. Your range has to be balanced. And I think in that spot with our ace-8, we have the perfect hand to definitely call the turn and then make up our mind on the river.
You're going to hate the next 3 or 4 hands. I will say for the viewers that I purposely picked out all the hands that I felt like I butchered. I obviously played some hands well to get to the final table, but this one I'm going to claim that I did a meta analysis, and this is why I did what I did. So respect my raise as raised. So we have to respect that. So this is the context. Cookie 99. I played with him on one of the other tables, and he was, in my opinion, by far the best player in the tournament. He actually won the whole tournament as well. He was very solid. He seemed to know where he was. He didn't get out of line. He was he was a very good, tight, aggressive player. And he, well, you'll see.
Can I just say I'm going to just not let it slide past the fact that you've just said Cookie was the best player in the tournament, and I'm absolutely 100% positive that both Dara and I played this tournament. So fuck you for that.
Remaining in the tournament.
But
I also want to say, I don't want to let it pass either. When I see respect my raise on the button, I'm absolutely not going to respect his raise.
No, absolutely not.
I talk about this in one of my videos. If people are trying to project something by their name, just assume they're the opposite. I bluff every hand, I play any two. Like, that's an it.
Yeah.
I have to say as well that once I saw respect my raise go all in, or effectively all in, I looked down at our stack, I looked at Cookie, and I went, there's no way I can misplay this hand.
Me too, This is the easiest hand ever. We're all in no matter what happens.
Yeah, I can't see any nuance to how this could have gone. But anyway, obviously you nit fold here, do you, Barry?
Yes, I nit fold. Like, well, this is the thing. I think Cookie is a very, very good player. He's a very solid player, and all right, this is my question. What's he isolating with here?
Well, when you can look at
the world,
HRC, it'll be very close to HRC, maybe a bit wider because there's a scared all nit in the big blind. Like
a lot of hands that we dominate are taking this line.
Yeah, you said he's a very good player. Like, playing against very good players sucks. Playing against very good players when you have a very good hand, that's a very good spot to be in. Like, this is an amazing spot to just get it in, double up to him, and then cover him.
Yeah,
you absolutely have to take this spot.
He's probably meant to go with like ace-8 suited here.
Yeah, look at this. Look at this. Ace-7 suited, ace-5 suited, ace-4 suited, sevens, threes, queen jack off, all those hands.
Yeah.
And then we're supposed to call off ace-10 off. And Barry's holding ace-king.
Yeah, I have to say this was pretty slam dunkish, and I think again, like
I'm already doing laps of celebration around my room. When
there's fist pumping going on
when I see this bet going in. Like, no matter what happens, this is just such an amazing spot. If you go back to HRC, there's an earthquake behind me, but if you just click on your calls when he shoved. So yeah, 2 lines down from where you were. There, like, look how much money you're making with ace king off.
Yeah.
Plus 1.31. Like, that's humongous at this point. You ran this for ICM, I presume, rather than GPV.
There's another aspect to this, which is that the buttons range is super, super wide.
Yeah.
So his money could be just absolute jam in this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it's such a popular spot for us.
That makes it super extra profitable.
Yeah.
So anyway, obviously at least we get to see the showdown. So we get to see you be a genius when he has the pocket 10s and you wouldn't have hit Barry's.
Oh no, I was really hoping that would have been the case, but it would have.
But we're actually going to see his ace-8 suited.
Nines. Okay, well, I mean, that's for a reason we avoided a flip, but like, he's miles up his range there, Barry. And you wouldn't have won the fold. You wouldn't have won the flip, so that's obviously a very good fold too.
Great situation. Great feeling when you do the wrong thing and it works out great, though.
Yeah.
This time I just included because it was funny, because I didn't have time to think about this because my dog was being sick in the kitchen.
Your dog being sick. Excuse for that.
Okay, we definitely have our clip for this video now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The dog ate my homework. The dog made me think he was sick.
No! Open this one. Don't show.
Oh my God! This is butcher. Wow! This is just destroying this hand.
So this is the dog is getting sick. I'll just get my equity now.
Yes, that was literally
how the dog is. Yeah. I just want to make a general point on playing second last tables. Like, I know people think I'm a big old nit that folds their way to the final table 9 of 9 and then tries to ladder, but actually, I tend to play second last tables fairly aggressively. Because getting to the final table with a stack is huge. It's massive in future equity terms. So, like, that's the last spot. I would just see it as a golden opportunity to set myself up to really attack the final table bubble.
I think that's a great point, Dara. And actually, that is, I couldn't sort of say that enough as well. I think there's two great opportunity. One is, the ICM of the small ladder jumps 18 to 10 are fuck all, really. And as Dara said, putting yourself in position to get a top 3 is what it should be all about now. The second part of that is, if you're a good player, you're going to get to play 6-handed, 5-handed on the way to the final table, which should give you an additional edge if you're better than most of these guys.
In a spot where you can
accentuated, short-handed.
Yeah, in a spot where you can exert massive ICM pressure. Like, the future equity in these spots is just amazing, and I think that's the quality of the ICM. Like, if you play strictly by ICM, I think you'll end up folding a bit too much. So it's worth. There's like an inflection point. The time comes when it's worth gambling to be the guy with the big stack who's abusing everybody in ICM. One of my students chopped a scoop main event this year, and on the second last table, he called off King Queen against a big stack, and his rationale was, I know this isn't a great spot, but if I win this spot, I'm now the chip leader and I get to pound the final table bubble. And that's what happened. He basically won a flip, and he was in an amazing spot. There's future equity is a thing in tournaments as well as ICM.
Yeah, and I do recall myself a few times actually on the way to a JP Masters final table a couple of years ago. I remember us having a chat about how I played one hand, where I actually did the thing that I don't normally do with the hand in that spot, which is that I think I had maybe jacks in the cutoff and under the gun opened, or under the gun one opened, and I decided to 3-bet induce, get it in. Now, against a lot of people in a lot of stages of the tournament, particularly I think maybe to profile the opener, I thought they would tend to be a little tighter, and I would normally flat that spot, and I'd be happy to flat that spot playing 40 bigs or whatever and just proceed that way through the hand. But I actually decided very similarly. I was like, oh, there's like 17 people left right now. If I do get it in against, I think 9s and 10s maybe could have played back at me a little bit. And certainly ace kings and ace queens were going to go with it, given the dynamic. I think we were 8-handed. I felt like if I can win that flip, or if I can, obviously there's an advantage to raising and maybe just taking it down there anyway. But that was a time to up the variance and take the higher variance line, because if I could win it, and I did, it's exactly what happened. I won the flip against ace king. I got to absolutely stomp the next 30 hands and build a big stack for the final table.
Yeah.
So we're 15 players left. The player on my immediate left is very, very, very aggressive. He's without doubt been the most aggressive player at the sort of the 2-table stages, shoving over a lot of hands. He was calling some all-ins with pretty weak sort of Jack 10 type hands. And I, in hindsight, wondered if I should have opened this at all for that reason. What would you say?
Yeah, like Dara said earlier on, and I think we had a similar stack at the time, and I think maybe there was slightly less ICM pressure on us, but it's it's not a huge difference. That he wouldn't open ace 2, ace 3, but then he would open ace 4, ace 5. But then again, they're the worst two, so it's pretty close.
Yeah, I've actually got a pile. I actually have a nice Munker sim, pretty much for this exact spot, and so I'm just going to look at it now. Yeah. At equilibrium, we're supposed to go on opening the suited aces. But for example, we fold pocket 7s because it doesn't have any blockers, and we fold stuff like queen jack off. But we can open the suited aces. If we do get 3-bet, we're actually, if he doesn't 3-bet us all in, we actually have the perfect hand to 4-bet shove. When he does this, we just fold, obviously.
Yeah, my take on that is I would be inclined to keep opening it, but I would also, if somebody decided actually there's a bit of a 3-betty dynamic, there's a bit of an aggro dynamic, although as Dara said, maybe that's the hand you choose as your light 4-bet, which would be the correct, it would be literally the nut light one to pick. But I wouldn't hold it too badly against somebody. I think it's like, if you are going to
I think in practice I often would fold, but if the guy was just 3-betting every hand, then I'd definitely just 4-bet pile, knowing that he's going to have to fold a lot, and even if we run into it, we're going to have 30% equity or more.
And this is it when you get spots around the margins, guys. And for anyone listening, I think this is a good maybe general takeaway, is that if you are right at the bottom of your range, then it's okay to let something like game flow or a kind of a general dynamical thing make your decision for doing it or not doing it. It makes sense when you're looking at like the worst or second worst hand, or even looking at the best one that you're not supposed to open, and maybe you think, okay, well, I will open one extra pip because everyone seems to be too tight. That's when you can kind of allow the game flow aspects creep in as deciders, but it should literally only be for those very narrow couple of hands, because if you overemphasize that stuff, it's way too easy to open too many hands or fold too many hands.
Agreed. Yeah, completely.
So we're on the final table bubble, and the brag ICM is really sort of heavily. So if this was pocket sixes, I think I wouldn't even bother playing. This has been an aggressive last two tables. Most of the players have been very aggressive. In fact, if I was to say the biggest difference I've noticed in sort of the end game of a Sunday major, even though this is one of the softer ones and tournaments that I'm used to, is how much more aggressive the last two tables were. So if this was pocket sixes, I think I'd just fold it straight away. If this was earlier on, or a not less big final table looming, I think with under 20 big blinds, I think I'd open shove a hand like pocket eights. What are you doing with pocket eights here?
I'm side opening. I said in the last spot that we're not supposed to open sevens. I think this is very similar. We have less big blinds. We'll want to see it later, but we've less big blinds. We've a pile of stacks behind us that can three bet us. I still think folding is just a little bit too nitty. I'm going to open it. I'm not going to feel great about it, and I'm going to accept that this is the worst hand I'm opening. And if I get three bet,
good. This is the hand that haunted me, and I'm glad you're saying that, because I really felt that pocket eights was the line.
Yeah, yeah, maybe with that.
Okay. Yeah, it feels like it is the line again. I think sevens and eights very similar here, just feel really ugly. And if you choose to fold them, I guess you can forgive yourself.
Yeah, I don't mind folding either.
But I think opening it will show a profit on the presumption that you proceed to play the hand post flop, as you will be forced to a decent amount of the time correctly, and also obviously having the discipline to let it go if someone comes back at you. I think it's just it's really tricky, because when you're put in these spots, and it does seem like you've actually had quite a few of them, Barry, where you're right at the bottom of a reasonable range to play, you're always going to be in a spot where you're not loving. You're like, it's not going to feel like slam dunk poker. It's going to be like, oh, what do I do now? Oh, I have to really think about this. But of course, we can't be afraid of putting ourselves in situations where we have to make future good decisions. We just put ourselves in difficult spots, then we make the best decision in the difficult spot. That's kind of what you have to do, and just back yourself.
Yeah, I think this is a spot that people used to play really, really badly years ago, where they thought, well, eights is just far too strong. And now, in fact, they were opening sixes and fives and going, well, I have a pair, so I have to open. Because the solvers weren't really around to tell us that was wrong. But there were definitely some players who were ahead of the curve. Like this reminds me of a hand I played on the my WSOP final table. I think there was 7 or 8 people left. ICM pressure was quite large, and Jason Kuhn opened off this kind of stack from this seat, I believe. And back in the day, the thinking was when you were under 20 big blinds, you just didn't raise fold. That was kind of the paradigm at the time. So he opened, and I had ace queen just behind, and I decided I was getting in against him. So I was trying to decide how much to three bet. And as I was making up my mind how much to three bet, I looked at the big blind, who's a reasonably aggro Russian guy, and he looked at his cards and he sat up like really excited. And I was the second or third shortest stack at this point, and I was like, I don't feel good about this anymore. That guy really likes his hand. I have ace queen. He can have ace king, those types of hands. And I definitely don't want to be flipping when I'm not the shortest stack. So after I thought about it for a while, I folded. And it came around to the big blind. He did three bet. Came back to Jason. I assumed Jason was just going to stick it in now. And Jason snap folded. And I was really surprised. And I thought, oh, wow, he must have had absolute garbage there. He was just at it. I went back and looked at the tape afterwards, and he had pocket eights. I was surprised he had done that with a hand that strong.
Oh wow! Wow. I'm so proud that I'm about to replicate Jason Kuhn.
Yeah, part of me thought, oh, it's because he saw the same thing that I saw. He saw the big blind get all excited when he looked at his hand. But I think, I also saw him do that in a big online tournament. That's just the way to play the hand, I think. Okay, this raise is too big.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can see you've done that adjustment that I do associate with, a certain player who's maybe really wants to end the hand now.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly
added that on top to sort of maybe give yourself an extra few folds against the prime joint, which you will, by the way. You should, by going bigger, you should get slightly more folds from people, because obviously you should be removing some hands that they can play with. But I don't think, I think it would be okay if you'd made it like 21 or something, but I think 25 is just way too big.
Yeah, I think we should just min raise our entire range here. But if I agree with Dave, we can make it maybe 21. Dara Dave used to make the point back to me in the day that people fold that off more to slightly more than min raise, mini plus he called it. But 25 is way too much, because now we've just torqued half a big blind when this happens.
Yeah, and also the problem can be is that, are you opening your range to 25k from this seat, or are you just deciding, eights and nines and maybe tens and maybe ace jack I'll do it with, or something, and then you become a little bit too exploitable and face up as he's got one of those hands he really doesn't like that much.
So now I went against one of my mantras that has always helped me in poker, which is to decide what you would do if you were re-raised ahead of time. I wasn't expecting a small re-raise either way, but I was stumped at this point. What do you do with pocket eights in this spot where you're almost committed when he bets that big? Not quite, but what do you think?
In the bin.
I don't think it's even close, to be honest, Barry, because I think his smaller sizing, remember, can be very explainable by the fact that he might have a hand that he's more than happy to get in against you, maybe nines, maybe tens, maybe jacks. But actually, if he got 4-bet by one of the lads behind, he doesn't want to put too much in because he might have a fold in that spot. So he might be weighting up his range in that way, where he's deciding, okay, well, actually 60 does the job because they don't have any chips committed, and he's happy against you.
I mean, if we call it, it's almost a pure set mine. We're not going to like any flop really that doesn't have an 8 on it. I mean, I guess if it comes 3 rag cards, we just try and go with our hands, but it's still not an amazing spot. So we're putting in a quarter of our stack to set mine. That can never be good.
Yeah. In fact, I think rather than call with the intention of set mining, you would actually probably be better, although it's still bad, to decide to do a stop go. Probably better.
Yeah, stop
beat his ace queens.
Stop go is probably better than a stop and muck.
Yeah. But it's all pretty horrible. But anyway, the brag ICM equity, whatever you've called it here, to get to the final table. The lights have been turned on. Everyone's excited. The crowd are here. And Barry, you are now showing us your final table appearance at the Unibet Supernova.
Yeah, I mean, if you can see the timer on the video, it doesn't last for particularly long.
You have 9 big blinds, so
yeah. So again, the guy that let's not beat around the bush. My boyfriend on my right, who's so dreamy, is about to raise, and I've got 9 big blinds, and he's raising into a big stack. I've got him pegged as quite a tight player. I personally don't think Ace Jack is ever even remotely good against him, but you're going to tell me the opposite, right?
I don't think it would be good to his 3-bet, but his opens, surely it is. I don't know. You're definitely not at C, but you're a long way behind the average here. You're a quarter of the average stack. There's a couple of guys with twice what you have, but everyone else has got a decent bit way out. So I think you're allowed pretty much, kind of take a decent spot here. I don't think you have to start turning down too many decent spots.
I think this is a slam dunk get in. I mean, you said he's a good player. If he's a good player, he's opening a lot of worse.
9 and ace 5 and
again, this is an ICM thing. I'm looking at what his range is supposed to be roughly. He's supposed to open all the suited aces and kings, all the pairs. Okay, the pairs aren't great for us, but he's supposed to open suited connectors as well, and worse aces than ours, and stuff like king jack, queen jack. I think this is just a spot where we have to just take it. So I'm also going to advocate a slightly weird one. I would actually consider calling here as well, even though we only have 9 big blinds.
Ooh.
And the reason why I say that is, if we call, he's gonna like. Just think about it. If you're the chip leader and the 9 big blind stack calls behind you,
Yeah,
you're gonna think that could be aces,
for sure.
and you're gonna play really straightforward after the flop. And ace jack is a hand which kind of like defines itself reasonably well on most flops. I mean, if we hit a pair, we obviously go with it. But if we don't hit a pair, we might get to showdown and we might have the best hand. So I'm not necessarily advocating in every case, but I think it's worth considering. And this is something I've been experimenting with recently, calling these types of hands. And it's incredible in the amount of time you miss the flop. It gets checked down because the guy is afraid you have aces and you win against 10-9 suited or something.
Yeah.
And similarly, like if we call and somebody shoves behind, I mean, it sucks to have to fold 2 big blinds, but ace jack will not be in good shape then. And there's a possibility somebody will bust in the hand and we'll ladder. So yeah, I mean, it's an unorthodox play, but I think it's worth considering.
I suppose if you did that as well, if you called and went to a flop, I guess you'd probably have more fold equity with your 7 big blinds in that spot than you would with 9 big blinds.
Yeah, like if I have aces, I'll call here as well. That's the other thing. So aces can't be the only call. So I think if we're going to balance our calls, this type of hand might be perfect actually.
Interesting. I like the improvisation there, Dara.
And I'll skip ahead because basically the next hand is exactly the same spot. Oh no, I edited it out. I shouldn't have mentioned that. I messed it. I did the same thing twice. So at this stage, Sniff My Hoop. There's some really childish names, by the way, on you. I can't quite remember what he did, but he did something incredible. I think, and if he's watching, I do apologize if I got this wrong. I think I saw him like calling all in for something like 20 big blinds with 6-7 suited or 8-9 suited or something like that. So I've just managed to chip up a little bit, and I'm thinking, do I really want to get it in with King Jack when he's going to call me very, very wide? I know that's actually a mistake because it's probably what you want with King Jack, but bearing in mind that I think he's going to call a lot of re-raisers, what is your range for reshipping here? Dara's going to say call and then just min bet.
I'm going with anything decent, probably any pair, most suited aces, ace 10 off, king queen off, king 10 suited, queen 10 suited, jack 10 suited, all of those hands. Given how wide he's opening, okay, it sucks that he might call a bit too wide, but we're going to be in good shape if he has all those wide calls as well. We might actually be dominating him, if he has jack 10 suited or something like that. So I'm definitely not passing this spot.
Yeah, I didn't, and then just for fun, I didn't fold ace king this time. This is the exit hand.
Just on a minor point, I don't shove this hand.
Well, technically, Dara, I didn't either. Look at it again.
Yeah, sorry. You're pulled into a re-raise, obviously.
well, now you mention it, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a spot where it's worth. I mean, obviously we should be shoving a lot of our range, but it's worth actually constructing a raising range as well. Because by having a raising range, we can raise some weaker hands as well that aren't profitable shoves. So yeah.
I actually think my logic at the time in game was the final table actually went on for a decent amount of time, and I am just nit folding a lot, as you can see. So I kind of felt like I was projecting this sort of desperate to ladder sort of image, which was probably accurate. So I kind of felt like if I shoved, it looked like a desperate attempt to stay in the game, and maybe I'll get called a little bit wider or something like that.
Well, if you are projecting that desperate to ladder, then people will 3-bet you lighter as well. So like if somebody has like ace 2, they're not going to call off here. But if you appear to be desperate to ladder and you min raise, they might decide to 3-bet. I mean, you're always getting it against tens as it happens, and almost dead. No,
oh dear. Well, death by quads. A fitting way to end, I guess. But like, very well played overall. Obviously, we didn't get to see all those fantastic hands where you built the stacks, but we did get to see some fairly tricky bottom of the range spots that you were faced with, which wasn't plain sailing by any means. In fairness to you, you were put in a spot where you sort of had to open the weakest hands in your range and proceed in that way, and that's a challenge in itself.
Yeah, I mean, other than the Ace King hand, which I'm glad you all enjoyed, it's nice to know that they were, because I felt like I was leveling myself a little bit in the sort of maybe with sort of 16 players to go in this tournament, that I was probably, am I being a nit? Am I thinking too much about brag equity, stuff like that? So it's nice to know that they weren't as clear cut as I thought they were after the fact.
Yeah, just to echo what David said, I'm very impressed by how you played overall. Your game continues to improve a lot. If you can just get that sort of last little bit of fear out when you're deep, you just kind of have to go for it in these spots and accept it. As Doug Polk says, sometimes it's your time to die, and pick and go with those spots. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll get, every time you get into the spot, you'll always be the short stack trying to ladder, and you'll never be the guy pushing the other people around. I mean, it's tricky because like you're a pretty good satellite player. You're actually a pretty good PKO player as well. And as we've talked about before, there is this ICM dial where PKOs are one end of the scale and satellites are the other, and normal tournaments are somewhere in the middle. I think it's the middle that you're struggling with. You're not sure.
100%. I've actually made a commitment this year not to play any PKOs for this exact reason. I think where my game is the weakest is the basic, the back to basics foundational stuff. Like I'm really good at spotting the extreme ICM spots and the extreme bounty spots. But I still don't have a very good baseline of which to then sort of adapt in game to work out when I should be putting dial, as you say, in one direction or the other. So this is why I'm playing the dying format that is vanilla tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this too. I've actually played less PKOs recently. I took a week off from PKOs because as great as they are online, I was thinking like when live poker comes back, if I've only played PKOs and satellites in the meantime, I'm going to struggle because 90% of live tournaments are vanilla, and all the bigger ones. So for people who are thinking about the return of live poker, it's worth doing what Barry's doing and sort of like try and sharpen up your game.
That's really good advice, Dara, and I absolutely agree. I think there is something very exciting about PKOs. It's sort of two prize pools. One of them you're playing for in that very moment at all times, and it does create a lot of excitement. And it's good to see more PKOs going on the Unibet schedule. Similarly with satellites, it's sort of conversely. Getting that satellite at the end is the huge payday, 10x your buy-in or whatever it happened to be. And of course, if you're the person who just misses out, you get zip. So it's so extreme in that sense. And then, of course, we do have this middle ground where these tournaments and still an awful lot of tournaments live. Barry, I think you have, played very well. Obviously, you're focusing in on, this sort of more vanilla territory these days where you can go through the natural stages of, early phase with deep stacks, middle game, approaching bubbles. And then, again, I suppose what we've been looking at probably as a feature of what were your most toughest hands in this hand history, bubble stuff and, second last table stuff. And they're both really, really interesting phases of the game. And I suppose if 8 of the 10 hands or 7 of the 10 hands have been about that, it's been a really worthy lesson for anyone watching to see specifically hands at that time period of a tournament.
Yeah, I genuinely think that I think 2 tables is probably where most people have the biggest leaks. If I'm anything to go by, and as Dara and I will sort of be reporting in the most recent book, like that's actually sort of the final table bubble is probably the most extreme ICM situation of all. And some people think that trying to ladder to a fourth place or third place is more ICM extreme, but it's the actual final table bubble itself, which is where the cheddar is made.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One final point before we wrap it up. I just want to say that like the sort of mental attitude that Barry displays is actually what you need if you want to improve. You see with a lot of recreational players, they don't want to be criticized in any way, and they think they played every hand perfectly, and they're always looking for justifications for why it is. But Barry's coming at it from the approach of like, I think I might have fucked this hand up. That's a very good approach to have. That's the way you get better. As soon as you reach the point where you think you know everything, you're in trouble. You're not going to get better.
Great point. Well, on that note, Barry Carter, Dara O'Kearney, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David, as ever.